to begin.
Good morning. The Supreme Court is now opened and in session. Welcome to the 2021 Law Day celebration. Traditionally, we've held the ceremony in the Supreme Court courtroom, but because of the pandemic, we're holding the ceremony using remote technology. However, we hope that this change in venue allows the students who have been unable to attend in the past because they were unable to get to Hartford to observe the ceremony live or at a later date on our YouTube page. To highlight this underpinning of our democratic government, the Connecticut Supreme Court Historical Society organized today's program, which I know will be interesting and educational for all of us. As background, the Supreme Court Historical Society was incorporated in 2005 to promote and preserve the state's judicial and constitutional tradition through scholarships, memorials, publications, and education. We appreciate all of the time and energy that the members devoted to organizing this event. I would like to recognize in particular Attorney William S. Fish, Jr., who chaired the Supreme Court Historical Society Law Day Committee. Among his many duties in that role, he reached out to high schools to invite students to participate in the Law Day contest and oversaw the selection process. In addition, a special thanks goes out to Attorney Wesley W. Horton. As president of the Supreme Court Historical Society, he was instrumental in making this event possible today. Now, turning to Law Day. As many of you know, Law Day is a national day set aside to celebrate the rule of law. As the American Bar Association website states, Law Day provides an opportunity to understand how the law and the legal process protects our liberty, strives to achieve justice, and contributes to the freedoms that all of us Americans share. It has been celebrated every year since President Dwight D. Eisenhower established the first Law Day in 1958. This year's Law Day's theme is Advancing the Rule of Law Now. According to the American Bar Association, and I quote, "The rule of law is the bedrock of American rights and liberties in times of calm and unrest alike." The 2021 Law Day celebration, Advancing the Rule of Law, now reminds us all that we, the people, share the responsibility to promote the rule of law, defend liberty, and pursue justice, unquote. We're very fortunate today to have with us Dr. Kalila Brown Dean, who's an associate professor of political science, as well as senior director of Inclusive Excellence at Quinnipiac University. In addition to being a scholar, she's an author and a civic influencer, and she has graciously agreed to talk with us today about the rule of law in our society. Professor Brown Dean.
Good morning, and thank you so much. I want to begin by thanking you, Chief Justice Robinson, for allowing me to be a part of this celebration. But more importantly, I want to thank you for cultivating a career of service and a commitment to justice. I want to thank our student awardees for their accomplishments, and as always, thank their teachers and their families for encouraging their excellence. To those of you who have gathered on a Monday morning amid such beautiful weather on yet another virtual platform, I want to thank you for indulging me, a boring professor, and listening to the brief comments that I will offer. As I thought about this year's theme for Law Day, Advancing the Rule of Law Now, I was reminded of the words of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who spoke of the fierce urgency of now. In his 1967 address, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, King said the following: "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time for vigorous and positive action." King spoke during a time of tremendous uncertainty in the United States and indeed across the globe, on the cusp of an election that would decide the fate of poor and working class communities, a time of zealots using violence and intimidation to deny constitutional rights to speech, assembly, and equal rights under law. King denounced our collective addiction to violence here and abroad. And now in 2020, after another contentious presidential election, a violent insurrection at the US Capitol, we continue to contend with two crippling pandemics. COVID-19 that has disproportionately taken the lives of Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, and racial violence that has robbed Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd, and countless others of their right to simply be. The guilty verdict that was rendered in Minneapolis provided a moment of relief and a temporary respite for many who doubted whether the rule of law would be advanced. And still, we must be clear that an act of accountability is a step toward rather than the penultimate achievement of justice. In this moment in our nation's history, hatred, fear, and ignorance have led to a 164% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes in just the first quarter of this year. Violence that is cloaked in the guise of patriotism undermines the very fabric of our nation. The urgency of advancing the rule of law to protect the rights enshrined in our Constitution is even greater now. After the unrest last summer and the uprisings in cities like Minneapolis and Chicago, the demonstrations in small towns like Woodbridge and Southbury, and the rush of every major corporation to signal their solidarity, many of us were overwhelmed by people reaching out and asking, what can we do? And my response is always the same. What we must do together is start where we are. The protests that we have seen were not the result of people who have no regard for the law. They were inspired by people of various backgrounds that no one should be above the law. Black, brown, gay, straight, Muslim, Hindu, cisgendered, trans, rich or poor, people came together to demand that personal responsibility we demand of civilians be upheld by those who swear an oath to serve and protect. Americans came together to demand that we together advance the rule of law to enshrine both personal responsibility and institutional accountability. And now, as 34 states pursue legislation to curb protest, it begs the question, how do we protect our fundamental rights, even when, and especially when, we don't agree? Protests don't just occur following the death of an unarmed civilian. They occur when Connecticut residents clash over whether to remove a controversial statue or to rename a school mascot. Protests occur when members of law enforcement voice their discontent with proposed legislation. And protests happen when Connecticut residents who support religious exemptions for vaccines gather at the state capitol to express their objections, or when families concerned about their loved ones who are incarcerated in or working for correctional facilities demand greater safety. In this climate, where the public square is so divided, advancing the rule of law is but one way of building communities that are stronger, healthier, more vibrant, and more connected. Advancing the rule of law now challenges us to consider why, in a country where voting is the most basic right of citizenship and the cornerstone of our democracy, why is it so difficult for so many to vote? Yes, we can acknowledge and celebrate historic firsts, but we must also ask why it has taken so long to reach them. Let me be very clear. This is not a partisan concern. Regardless of how one feels about the outcome of the 2020 election, we cannot deny that it was a remarkable year for people to affirm their political choice. We saw a 62% voter turnout in this country, the highest in modern history. That means that people of all political backgrounds and ideologies affirm their ability to vote. And now in 2021, we see 33 states introducing 165 bills aimed at limiting who can vote and how we vote. Advancing the rule of law requires that we collectively commit to protecting the importance of the vote for all Americans, of ensuring that we are focusing on removing the barriers to what Chief Justice Earl Warren once called the essence of a democratic society. I am fortunate that here in Connecticut, I host a radio show and podcast for Connecticut Public Radio called Disrupted. I firmly believe that engaging in conversations across the lines that traditionally divide us can help us build together. We just released our 30th episode, and we cover topics as diverse as art as an engine for social change. We talk about the experiences of law enforcement officers who navigate being Black and Blue. And we also talk about increasing access to vaccines. The goal of our show is simple: to affirm that through disruption comes innovation. And so it is my profound hope that as we work together to advance the rule of law, we will take a moment to remember what it felt like a year ago at the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, what it was like to face the uncertainty of not knowing whether the small business we built would be able to survive, what it meant to scramble to acquire masks, hand sanitizer, and toilet paper, wondering whether we would receive that dreaded internet connection unstable notification as we tried to log into a virtual classroom or a meeting or telehealth appointment. I want us to remember the very long meetings to determine whether it was necessary to suspend judicial proceedings to protect the public's health without infringing upon their right to a speedy trial. And I want us all to remember the powerful ways that neighbors and communities came together to support one another with the simple yet powerful act of saying good morning. As we come through this pandemic and prepare for those yet to come, let us harness the understanding and the innovation that developed over this past year. May we commit together to making legal proceedings, government hearings, and educational opportunities more accessible to build transparency, trust, and engagement. These commitments are essential to advancing the rule of law now and for the days yet to come. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brown-Dean, for those inspiring and thoughtful remarks. I'm sure that we will all reflect on your remarks throughout the rest of the day and in the following weeks and years to come. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Attorney Wesley Horton, who will give remarks on behalf of the Supreme Court Historical Society. Attorney Horton.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice Robinson. And I also want to thank Bill Finch for the wonderful job he's done in preparing this program. And I also want to thank his predecessor, Kim Knox, who's a judge of the Superior Court and has been in charge of this ceremony for many years on behalf of the Supreme Court Historical Society. I also want to say, and I'm speaking directly to the students as well as to the justices, that our role in the Connecticut Supreme Court Historical Society is to research and publicize the history and the importance of the court that year before. Because, and students, I want you to know that you have rights as Americans, but you also have rights as Connecticuters, and sometimes those rights are greater than your rights as an American, and it's the purpose of this court to make sure that you can exercise those rights not only as an American, but also as a Connecticuter. To give you an example, our society had a program last week about women's rights in the 19th century. Well, let me tell you about a woman by the name of Mary Hall, who wanted to be a lawyer in 1880. I'm sorry, this mechanical problem. And that's exactly actually a metaphor for what happened to Mary Hall if she had tried to become a lawyer anywhere else in the United States. She would have been blanked out, exactly the way I was a couple of minutes ago. But in Connecticut, she was allowed to practice law in 1880 because of a decision by the Connecticut Supreme Court. And that was the first Supreme Court in the country who had said so. Let me just briefly give you one other example. You have, as students, have a right to an equal educational opportunity in the state of Connecticut. Now, you may think that's a duty, but I can tell you there are countries in the world where you may theoretically have the right to an education, but as a practical matter, it does not exist. And in that situation, you would think that it was a right to have an education. And I would simply say that now gets us to the theme of rule of law, because what rule of law means is that rights that you have are enforceable. Without an enforceability, there's no rights. There are many places in the world where you technically have rights, but there's no court or any other institution that will actually enforce those rights. So that is the role of the Connecticut Supreme Court here in Connecticut, to make sure that if you have a right that under the Connecticut Constitution or the state constitution or federal or state law, that you will be able to exercise that right. And with that in mind, we have decided one of our roles is to give awards to high school students who have done an excellent job in addressing whatever the theme of the year is. And in this year, it happens to be rule of law. So for this year, we have selected a piece of art called Myopia by artist Isaiah Friedman Ringwood as the winning entry for this year's Law Day Art Contest. A copy of the artwork has been included in the program. I am pleased to introduce Isaiah to you, currently a student at Wethersfield High School. Isaiah, will you please turn on your camera and take a moment to address the topic covered by your artwork?
Yes, thank you very much. Piece Myopia depicts our current outlook of society. The idea that by seeing no color, race, or sex, equality can remain. I believe by not seeing these elements within our society, it cannot be considered balanced or just. Through this piece, I pose the question, what would happen if we saw our differences? I believe it could bring justice to our nation and advance modern-day rule of law. Choosing to represent Lady Justice as a Native American honors one of the first cultures ignored in our society. The piece is intended to show the presence of diversity being ignored, resulting in an incomplete society. This is shown through the representation of the broken scale falling from Lady Justice's hands. Most importantly, the piece incorporates an important piece of society, structure, depicted by the scale's handle. As it is shaped like a dagger, symbolizing strength, it reminds me of the people of our opportunity to reflect justice back into our society by simply seeing all of ourselves, our color, race, and sex. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Isaiah. That is just a stunning entry, and we all thought it was a terrific work, and I'm sure the justices think so too. Thank you very much, Isaiah. The Supreme Court Historical Society has selected the essay written by Kevin Liu and Weiss Yuan, Amity High School students, as the winning entry for this year's Law Day Essay Contest. The essay has been included in the program. I am pleased to introduce to you Kevin and Weiss. Kevin and Weiss, please turn on your cameras and take a moment to read your essay.
Thank you. My name is Weiss.
Hello, and my name is Kevin. It's very nice to see you all.
So we were both seniors from Amity Regional High School in Woodbridge, Connecticut. We are both very honored to be here today and be able to present our essay, which is entitled Our Oath. So to begin, The oath of office in America is a sacred commitment of dedication, unique among all the nations of the world. Our nation's office holders swear loyalty not to the president, nor to the faith, or indeed even to the country. Rather, every public servant in America, from young second lieutenants to the President of the United States himself, swears to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The solemn duty to uphold our nation's founding document eclipses all other considerations. It is, as General Mark Milley puts it, our moral North Star. Because fundamentally, the obligation of public service is not only to the Constitution, but to the individual liberties that the Constitution ensures for all Americans.
In this way, the manner in which our nation's government is construed affirms that the rule of law is superior to the rule of any individual. The universal nature of the Constitution and the fact that its tenets concern human liberties as a whole instead of specific statutes enables it to embody the rule of law for not only American society, but for all mankind. As Professor John Weil notes, in securing American rights, the Constitution has embodied universal principles. Fundamentally, the Constitution's rule of law does not entail any actual law, but rather delineates the way law itself should be constructed, and those inviolable rights which must be observed by the law. These principles are worth protecting. As the Army's motto states, this will defend. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today. And does anyone have any questions before we elaborate a bit on our essays?
Good.
I guess Kevin and I could both talk a bit about how we came to write this essay and our idea behind it.
Yeah.
So one of the common themes that we really saw through our research was how the rule of law is universal. We see it through everyday life, through our court system, through the jury process, and through much of how society works. But also we see it in other aspects, such as history, through our Declaration of Independence and Constitution. And one of the things that we really wanted to highlight in this essay was how within the Constitution, the oath of office is taken, the same oath of office is taken by second lieutenants, politicians, all federal employees. And that oath of office is the same oath of office to defend the Constitution as the highest office holder that the president takes. And I think in that way, and many other ways, in other traditions that we have, that affirms that the rule of law is superior to the rule of any individual.
I think simultaneously, even though the rule of law is such a universal concept, as Weiss has mentioned, it nonetheless is this very intangible, nebulous idea simultaneously. So critical to the foundation of our society, yet as a common citizen, it's difficult to perceive the influence of the rule of law, often upon our lives. And why the documents such as the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence or the oath that public servants take, why that's so important is in part because of the fact that the rule of law is it's the link between us common people and the rule of law. It's that tangible boundary which we can understand and see the rule of law in action. And so that was a principle that we really wanted to capture within the heart of our essay.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Kevin and Weiss. I think too many people think the oath of office is just some unimportant technicality, and you have shown us that it is not that it's the metaphor for rule of law. And thank you very much. And you can see, I think, justices, why the committee chose Isaiah's artwork and Kevin and Weiss's essay. So I now turn the program back over to Chief Justice Robinson.
Thank you, Attorney Horton. It's moments like this that make me really proud of our country. And quite frankly, it makes me really believe that we have a wonderful future ahead. To know that young people like this get this, what is simple and complex concept all at the same time. So thank you to all of you for renewing my batteries. I really appreciate it. Congratulations to Isaiah, Kevin, and Weiss. Your willingness to participate in this contest is a testament to your understanding of our constitutional democratic republic form of government. It gives me great hope for the future. Congratulations and thank you so much for your participation. As we conclude today's wonderful ceremony, I would like to address all students viewing this live and archived on YouTube. We are fortunate that our future includes individuals such as yourselves who are committed to the rule of law and our courts as a bedrock of democracy. Thank you all for joining us on this very special day. Advancing the rule of law is always important, and now, in this time of civil unrest, it is more crucial as ever. With that, court is adjourned. Thank you very much.